Well, the big news today was the fact that Shedeur Sanders suffered an oblique injury in early drills. He was shut down for the rest of
The mind proved to me that you can do it. But he proved in one game that he could do it, so much so that they now have to give him the chance.
We know how the game goes. But then he starts talking about the offense, right? 0 giveaways. Okay, this is when you're supposed to insert Shedeur, some fans think. Let's talk.
Okay, special teams, Buki, takeaway.
Because what Kevin Stefanski did is actually par for the course. I know a lot of fans don't want to hear it. I know a lot of fans don't know about it, but I'm gonna take y'all inside this lock.
What if one of college football's most exciting stars was being quietly pushed out of the spotlight on purpose? Just a few months ago, Shedeur Sanders was the rising name everyone in the NFL was watching. Fast, sharp, composed, and fresh off a solid preseason performance that had fans buzzing. But then, almost overnight, everything changed. A sudden injury popped up. His name disappeared from first-team reps, and the coach who once praised his potential now barely mentions him. But this isn't just about one injury, and it's definitely not just about a rookie fighting for a shot.
But you telling me what he can't do. Like my coach just said in college, find something that he can do. See, you keep telling me what Shedeur can't do. Well, your job as a coach is to put players in position and find something that they can do.
Because behind closed doors in Cleveland, something doesn't add up, and it's raising serious questions. Why would a team with struggling quarterbacks sideline the one guy who just delivered? What's really going on with Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski? And why are analysts, fans, and even insiders suddenly calling for Shedeur to be traded before he ever gets a fair chance? Stick around, because we're about to break down the controversy, the rumors, and the chess game happening behind the scenes in Cleveland, and what it means for Shedeur Sanders' future in the NFL.
And the opponent for me, Stephen A., doesn't matter. No. Shefty, it's what does it look like? And he looked like a guy that should be getting opportunity to say, nope, you're actually not good enough. If I were the Browns, he would be getting reps with the starters this week. I felt like going into the game, if he played a certain way, that would be the case. He should getting reps with the starters this week, and he should, I always say it this way, prove to me you can't do it. Prove to me you can't do it. And so far, he has not done it.
At first glance, it sounded like simple preseason bad luck. The Browns announced that Shedeur Sanders had suffered an oblique injury during early team drills. Word spread fast, with reporters noting that his status for the upcoming game was uncertain. But within hours, something about the story started to feel off. Sources close to Sanders pushed back immediately. According to those in his circle, this wasn't a major setback. In fact, they described it as nothing more than soreness, a minor issue that Shedeur had played through before without missing a snap. So why was this being framed like a legit injury? Why shut him down completely? The timing couldn't be more suspicious.
Shedeur, there will be no media attention like should he be the starter, Stafford's there. And for the Rams, it gives you a chance to maybe have an answer at quarterback, even if it's a long shot, after this year, if this does end up being Stafford's last year. And if you're the Browns, if you spent a fifth on Shedeur and just trade him for a fourth,
Just days earlier, Sanders had delivered what many called the best quarterback performance of the Browns' entire preseason. He looked crisp, confident, and most importantly, ready. Fans were calling for more playing time. Some analysts were even suggesting he should be fast-tracked for serious reps. And then, he vanishes. This wasn't the kind of injury that required scans, therapy, or weeks on the bench. It was a vague, easily disputed detail, just enough to pull him out of the spotlight without setting off alarms. And to make it even stranger, the Browns coaching staff barely addressed it. No clear answers, no follow-up progress report, just clean silence. Almost like they wanted people to stop asking questions.
Did Kevin Stefanski do or not do that got everybody mad and hot 100? Let's talk.
All right, fellas, hey, that concludes that block versus Carolina. That compete block, that's it. And guess what? That block that we just got completed with that practice versus them with this game tonight, this football team got better. This football team got better this entire week by stacking these days, by competing versus them out there in the
Was this really about protecting a player's health or protecting a narrative? Because just as the pressure was growing to give Sanders real snaps, this injury conveniently shuts everything down. If it really is just soreness, as insiders claim, then why treat it like a season-ending setback? Or maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about Shedeur's body at all. Maybe it was about keeping him off the field, no matter the cost. And if that's true, it's just the beginning of a much bigger story. As if the injury excuse wasn't odd enough, what happened next sent even more shockwaves through the Browns fan base. In a post-game press conference, Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski seemed cool and measured. He praised Shedeur Sanders' development, talked about keeping all quarterbacks in the mix, and said he was still evaluating the depth chart. It all sounded reasonable, until the actual depth chart dropped. That's when things took a bizarre turn. Despite outperforming every other QB on the roster, Sanders was listed 4th. Not 2nd, not 3rd, 4th. Behind 2 other quarterbacks who were also recovering from injuries themselves. Let that sink in. Sanders was healthy enough to play through soreness, posted the strongest in-game performance, and still got demoted behind players who hadn't even stepped on the field. At that point, fans were furious, analysts were confused, and most people watching closely started asking the same question. What did Stefanski know that the rest of us didn't? Or was he just straight up ignoring the obvious? Some began speculating that Stefanski never intended to give Shedeur a real shot, that no matter how well he performed, the decision had already been made behind the scenes. Shedeur wasn't just fighting for reps, he was fighting against a fixed system. And if that's the case, the injury report, the sudden narrative shift, the low depth chart ranking, it all starts to look less like coincidence and more like a coordinated sidestep. Because 4th string doesn't make sense unless you're trying to hide someone, or slow their momentum, or quietly bury a story that the fans were starting to run with. But the Browns media team didn't bury everything fast enough, because national analysts were already sounding alarms. And their pressure brought even more heat to a coach who was now running out of excuses. If the Browns were hoping the media and fans would move on after downgrading Sanders, they seriously miscalculated. Because instead of dying down, the questions just kept growing. Hours after Sanders was mysteriously benched for soreness, another report surfaced. It claimed that Shedeur wouldn't even be considered for game time in the upcoming preseason matchup. Not evaluated, not limited reps, flat out not playing. But if the injury was so minor, if recovery was expected by tomorrow, as insiders mentioned, why was Stefanski already ruling him out? At this point, the injury excuse was starting to fall apart and fast. And that's when fans began piecing together the timeline. Days before the announcement, Sanders had been gaining huge momentum, stealing headlines and outperforming expectations with poise and precision. The buzz wasn't just building, it was exploding. Shortly after that performance, bam, he's injured, drops on the depth chart, and goes radio silent. It felt too neatly timed, too orchestrated, like the Browns were pumping the brakes right as Shedeur was heating up. Some insiders even whispered that the team's executives had grown uncomfortable with how quickly Sanders' fanbase was growing and how loudly the calls for him to start were becoming. In other words, his rise wasn't part of the plan, and instead of adjusting, the organization hit the panic button. Even more telling, the official messaging about Shedeur's status kept changing. First, it was a minor injury, then it was precautionary. Then suddenly, he's out. No media access, no on-camera updates, nothing. That level of silence? That smells less like injury management and more like image control. And the more people looked, the more it felt like the Browns were using the injury to shield themselves from making a real decision, because if Shedeur played again and played well, they wouldn't be able to justify keeping him on the bench any longer. But whatever the Browns were trying to suppress, they couldn't stop the outside noise. Because next, the critics came in hard, and one high-profile voice lit the spark that turned this into a full-blown controversy. When the Browns kept dodging questions and sticking to the same injury excuse, fans weren't the only ones getting frustrated. That's when the analysts stepped in, and they didn't hold back. Dan Orlovsky, a respected voice in the football world and former NFL quarterback himself, went on air and said what everyone else was thinking. Give this kid first-team reps. What more does he have to prove? Orlovsky broke it down crystal clear. Shedeur had outshined expectations, showed control in the pocket, stayed composed under pressure, and moved the offense better than the rest. And yet, he wasn't being rewarded with even a chance to compete. For Orlovsky, it wasn't just questionable, it felt deliberate. But here's the part that really stirred the pot. Orlovsky added, if Stefanski truly believes Sanders isn't the guy, then show us why. Show us evidence on film, because so far, he's passed every test. That line hit hard, because through 2 games, Shedeur hadn't done anything to warrant being pushed down the depth chart. No dumb mistakes, no lazy decisions, no glaring red flags. If anything, he had done exactly what coaches usually beg rookies to do: stay ready, stay efficient, and make the most of your reps. He delivered. And yet, Stefanski's response? Another vague injury update. No acknowledgement of the backlash. No justification of the depth chart. Just more silence, like he was hoping the media cycle would move on before things really exploded. But instead of going away, the story picked up steam. Other analysts began to echo Orlovsky's concerns. Sports journalists, YouTubers, even former players started calling out the inconsistency. Everyone began asking the same thing. What is Kevin Stefanski so afraid of, and why won't he just give Shedeur a shot? But what came next made things even messier, because reports started surfacing that Shedeur wasn't just frustrated. He might be looking for a way out. With fans demanding answers and analysts calling out the coaching staff, the questions surrounding Shedeur Sanders weren't just about playing time anymore, they were turning into something much bigger. Suddenly, rumors started flying. And some of them were impossible to ignore. Multiple sources reported that Shedeur Sanders had begun seriously weighing his options. According to one insider, Sanders was considering asking for a trade if the Browns continued sidelining him with no explanation. And this wasn't just frustration talking. This was reportedly a strategic move, especially with the regular season approaching fast. Then, ESPN analyst Mick Wright dropped a bombshell. A trade to the Los Angeles Rams could be a win-win for everyone. Think about it. Behind Matthew Stafford, Shedeur could develop without the constant media pressure or internal politics. There'd be no immediate expectations, no fan base demanding he start tomorrow, and far less drama. And for the Rams, who might be staring at the final season of Stafford's career, a quarterback like Shedeur could be a smart, long-term play, low risk, high upside. It made sense on every level. For Sanders, it's a fresh start in a market that knows how to develop talent. For the Browns, it's a clean-out, especially if they can flip a 5th-round pick into a 4th-round return. And for the Rams, it's a chance to grab a promising young QB without the pressure of a draft day splash. But here's where things got complicated. One source close to the Browns organization claimed that Shedeur had already hinted at wanting out not to the media, but behind the scenes. Whether it was frustration, politics, or just the writing on the wall, insiders said the tension in the locker room was real. And it was only getting worse. At this point, what started as a simple injury update had turned into a storyline too big to contain. The trade rumors weren't just speculation anymore, they were becoming a real possibility. But just as the whispers of a trade were heating up, another unexpected twist came from the Browns' own front office. Because apparently, not everyone in the organization was on board with letting Shedeur go. Just when it looked like Shedeur Sanders could be quietly shifted off the roster, reality inside the Browns' front office took a sharp turn, because not everyone was willing to let him go. According to multiple sources, Browns owner Jimmy Haslam had seen enough. After witnessing the buzz surrounding Sanders from fans flooding social media to prominent analysts calling out the coaching staff, Haslam reportedly stepped in and put his foot down. He didn't want to lose Sanders, period. And that decision didn't just complicate things, it clashed directly with the way head coach Kevin Stefanski had been handling the entire situation. Behind closed doors, it reportedly created a divide between ownership and staff. On one side, you had Stefanski sticking to his story, holding the line on Sanders' injury, and refusing to give him starter reps regardless of performance. On the other, you had an owner watching a fan-favorite QB being pushed out, and realizing it might come back to haunt the franchise. One insider put it bluntly, Haslam doesn't want another Brock Purdy or Jalen Hurts situation slipping through the cracks. Sanders has star potential, and it's clear the fans see it before the coaching staff does. The pressure was intense. Stefanski now found himself in the hot seat, not just with the media, but within his own organization. His decisions were under fire, with fans, players, and now ownership pushing back against the narrative he'd tried to control. And the fans weren't staying quiet either. As tensions rose, so did the calls for change. People were tagging team execs on X, Twitter, flooding Browns forums, demanding answers. Some fans even started open campaigns for the team to trade Sanders somewhere he'd be appreciated, while others blamed Stefanski directly for stalling the growth of one of the most promising young quarterbacks in the league. What had started as a preseason competition had now turned into a full-scale power struggle. And heading into the final weeks of preseason, the Browns were now balancing more than just a quarterback controversy. They were balancing an entire PR disaster. So here we are. After weeks of speculation, shifting narratives, and mounting pressure from every angle, Shedeur Sanders still doesn't have a clear path forward in Cleveland. He's delivered on the field. He's stayed quiet off of it. And yet, somehow, he's been pushed to the sidelines by a coach who refuses to acknowledge what everyone else plainly sees. And now, the Browns are standing on a razor's edge. Do they double down on Stefanski's questionable handling of their young star, or do they finally let Sanders compete like he earned and silence the growing speculation that he's being set up to fail? Because here's the reality. This isn't just about one quarterback, it's about what kind of team Cleveland wants to be. Do they want to be the franchise that lets personal politics get in the way of progress? Or the franchise that recognizes potential, listens when the world is watching, and gives a young player the shot he deserves? For Sanders, a trade could reset everything. Moving to a team like the Rams with a veteran like Stafford to learn from, and a front office willing to patiently develop quarterbacks could be the key to unlocking his future. It's a chance to grow outside the drama, away from the spotlight, and without being overlooked at every turn. For the Browns, trading him could bring value, sure, but the real loss isn't the pick. It's what Sanders might become somewhere else if they never give him a real shot in Cleveland. And that story? That regret? It could follow them for years. Ultimately, whether Sanders stays or goes, this entire saga has exposed the cracks in Cleveland's decision-making, and the fans aren't forgetting it. So now we'll ask the question directly. Do you think Shedeur Sanders is being unfairly benched? Or is there something we're not seeing behind the scenes? Is the injury narrative legit, or just a smokescreen to protect bad coaching decisions? And if you were Shedeur, would you stay with the Browns or try to get out now while the rest of the league is still watching? Let us know what you think in the comments below. We want your take on what's really going on in Cleveland and where you believe Shedeur Sanders should go next.